What's happening, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Crash Bang Boom podcast. Today's guest is drummer Donald Tardy of Tampa, Florida's own Obituary, who's been at it for over 30 years. We get into everything from the origins of the band to influential Florida bands that preceded them, his thoughts on what can be excessive production on drums and recordings, writing and recording in their home studio, plus self-imposed limits on beers prior to and or during the show. So crack a cold one yourself, and I hope you enjoy it. Crash Bang Boom podcast can be found on my SoundCloud and YouTube pages, as well as iTunes, Amazon Music Podcasts, Google Play, Podbean, Stitcher, Luminary, and more. Check out my Facebook and Instagram pages for additional content and updates. Please give me a like and or a follow and or a subscription if you could. Shout out to my sponsor, New Orleans Record Press, who's pressing the hell out of records presently and has a quicker turnaround time than most in the industry. And they can help you with everything from design to mastering, electroplating, vinyl coloring options, packaging, and more. They even got a handy little real-time quote generator to help you tally it all up. So give them a holler, and that is NewOrleansRecordPress.com. Keep your eyes and ears peeled for artists offering online lessons, master classes, workshops, and more, as well as live streams like Obituary is doing October 17th, playing Slowly We Rot in its entirety, October 24th, playing Cause of Death in its entirety, and another of rare classics and more on November 7th. So tune in, y'all. Also, no shortage of good fundraisers, charities, GoFundMes, and more, or even websites like SaveOurStages.com, where we're looking to bail out venues very much in need during these tough COVID times. Help any way you can. All right, here we go. Donald Tardy, Obituary, Crash, Bang, Boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
Yes! All right, what's happening? I'm here with Donald Tardy, the drummer of Obituary, straight out of Tampa, Florida. I believe you're there now. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, Jody. How you doing?
I'm hanging in there. You know, it's strange times, obviously. Got to make the best of it, not mope around like a miserable son of a bitch. It can be kind of easy to do that. I'm just trying not to, die of liver failure or go broke or get COVID. I suppose those could be three concerns.
Yeah, well, I would have had the same exact answer if you asked me that question. So, right on. Kudos.
I hear you, man. How has the obituary world been in light of said COVID world in which we find ourselves? And have y'all postponed any tours or recordings, or what's been going on?
Yeah, I mean, we were our plug was pulled just like the rest of the touring world and venues all at the same time on March 12th. Mm-hmm. We were in the highest part of the United States, almost up into Canada, somewhere in Michigan. Mm-hmm. Black Label. It was a Black Label Society tour.
Gotcha.
And we knew shit was going down, but we were still just trying to tour. And then, sure enough, we just the second half of the tour got canceled. We got sent home, and we've been home since March.
Wow.
So yeah, obviously, you first come home and you try to stay away from the band members' children and families and be smart about it. So we did that obviously through April. And then we just kind of looked at each other and said, look, we're the safest humans there are. We take it serious. I go to my grocery store once a week and get everything I need. And that's all I do. And I stay away from the world.
Right.
And I know my brother and Trevor pretty much do the same thing. So we then obviously just had to make the decision that, we can't hide forever. So at least we are knee deep in writing new music. So I'm super excited about taking our time and just writing an album.
Right.
Because we're not going anywhere because it was canceled. We then sat now for the last 7 months. Other stuff was supposed to be obviously August through November in America, and that is clearly not happening.
Right.
We still had stuff already booked for March, April 2021, and now that looks like it's being pushed.
Wow.
A Europe tour. So it's musicians, live venues, and the music industry are the ones that are being punished for a horrible America right now. Taking charge and getting rid of this virus instead.
Right.
People are just kind of tired of talking about it and just try to forget about it, like our leader.
I hear you, man. Well, what have you been doing to stay up? It sounds like if the band's been rehearsing, then you at least have that outlet and you can get out and play and have it contribute towards new music and a new record. So has that been your outlet for the most part?
Yeah, pretty much. And if anyone knows Obituary long enough, we've had the house that my brother and I have owned for 22 years has become the studio, and it's been the studio for 2 decades. And in fact, we've done the last 5 albums here. So
wow.
I don't live here anymore because John has children, but I'm only 18 minutes away.
Wow.
Interstate 18 minutes. So I'm here every day with my drum kit, pretty much. I sneak in and out of the studio, whether they're home or not. I just I'm just practicing, trying to keep my chops up.
Yeah.
Keep myself entertained and trying to stay super positive and pushing forward with new creative ideas and music and going for it,
Yeah. Have you been obsessing over or drilling any particular chops or anything like that has been interesting for you during this time?
For me, everyone knows I am not a technical dude, and my technique, if you see me, it's hilarious, and I've been doing that for 37 years.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really just being here all the time with my drum kit, and then whether it's playing non-metal music with headphones, and then I have it set up with my Pro Tools rig where the drum kit, it just sounds so amazing in the Vic Firth headphones.
Mm-hmm.
And that mix, along with, then you just bring in some tracks that you want to jam, whether it's a Steve Miller or
Totally.
like something totally non-metal that So for me, it just kind of keeps it keeps teaching me. Even at 50 years old, I'm still learning every day of less is more as a drummer for me, and it's just how you can do it tasty and solid, and then powerful when needed. And I just always, I'm always creating and just thinking about drums. I am not a rudiment dude or practicing every day on a pad. I've never practiced on a pad in my life.
Wow.
I just practice every day, and I know what I like and what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not the most technical nor fast drummer in the world. Mm-hmm. And I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I hear you, man. Well, when you think about the origins of Obituary, tell me a little bit about what's going on in Florida in the late 80s, because, I think when I think about Obituary, I believe I became conscious of y'all probably around, 90 when Cause of Death came out. And
right.
Then, of course, fellow Florida band Death puts out Spiritual Healing that year. And then, of course, they put out Human the following year in 91 with, of course, the incredible Sean Reinert on it. Rest in peace, Sean Reinert.
Yep.
But tell me about the Florida scene, because it's interesting. I mean, between Morbid Angel and Deicide, you have these Florida bands that I wasn't obviously down there to witness it. But tell me a little bit about what was going on in those late '80s in the sort of scene that was happening down there.
Yeah, it is wild thinking of how long ago it was, because I moved from Miami, Florida. My family did in 1980 to Tampa, Florida, and I was already interested in drums. I had, I got a snare drum at 7 years old probably. And it was always, I drove my family crazy just beating on shit. Mm-hmm. So yes, so once the music scene was introduced to me, when I knew for a fact at the age of probably like 83-ish, 82, 83, when we start hearing heavy metal and freaking out on it as a 12-year-old kid, I knew what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be I wanted to be in a rock and roll band and be a drummer. So once that, and then of course it went from Metallica and the, Megadeths, or Metallica early on, and early Slayer and Venom, and there was music there, but I was so young, I was influenced by, and there was no internet back then. It was just what you got your hands on as a young teenager. 13, I was probably 13. Trevor was 14, so he's the one that started getting his hands on vinyl,
totally,
and Iron Maiden albums and AC/DC and ZZ Top. And then, so that was my roots of getting into music. So when death metal exploded, we just were doing what we thought was going to be cool. We tried to be Metallica, but then the influences right here in Brandon, Florida, and Tampa, Florida, was Nasty Savage and Savatage. And that was like, those dudes were years ahead of us and already well established and killer back in 85,
Right.
And it opened all our eyes. We just, immediately said, I want equipment, I need a drum kit, and we need to start writing our own music.
Wow.
And so when everybody was doing that, 85, 86, 87, 88, us, Deicide, Morbid, and Death, Malevolent Creation, Down South, everything was exploding super, super early on. But again, I was so young and just focused on Xecutioner that I didn't really pay much attention. We were probably passing each other at the mall and stuff, but we were so young, we weren't in bars yet,
Right.
Then we start playing music, and we had our own stuff in 86 and start playing bars, but, sneaking in back doors of bars because you're only 17 years old just to perform.
Yeah.
So it exploded early on, already 86, we were already burning venues down with, pyro and shit, and opening for Chuck and Death, and opening for Nasty Savage. And it was cool, man,
Wow. You mentioned some of the earlier bands, the heavier bands, between Slayer and Metallica and Megadeth and this and that and the other. Was there any particular record for you and your brother where you both kind of had a light bulb moment, or did you precede sort of your interest in heavy music and then he caught on, or?
it was kind of a stepping stone, because we saw the light with Savatage and Nasty Savage. Just even though that wasn't death metal, it was so metal to us because we were able to ride our bicycles through the neighborhood over to their neighborhood and look through the window and see Nasty Savage, practicing.
Wow.
And this is 85,
Yeah.
So that was kind of the first influence. And then Savatage, those albums, with For My Brother, I can see that became his favorite singer. He was just like a witch. It was the most amazing voice and powerful at the same time. And so that was the influence. But yes, of course, then like what entered our lives for me and John and Trevor was Hellhammer.
Wow.
Right when we heard Hellhammer, early Celtic Frost,
Mm-hmm.
it was the heaviest shit I've ever heard in my life. And I said, this is the birth of Xecutioner right here. This is which then became Obituary, but that was the beginning of it. The Hellhammer album and those first two Frost albums.
Right. Wow. That is really cool to hear you say that.
Yeah, man.
When you think about going back to the recording processes of those first couple of records back in the 80s, I mean, here you are 30 some odd years playing, still some of that material and still in the same band, still doing the thing. When you think back to that time, tell me a little bit about going into the studio and getting those first couple of records down. Was it challenging? Was it stressful? Was it strange?
Well, it'll teach a lot of people that don't know the history of this. It was so long ago, and it's funny saying it that way. It was so long ago. Slowly We Rot was recorded on 8-track at Morrisound Studios, but it was before a big board. It was literally 8-track.
Wow.
So people that know what 8-track is, you're like, how the hell did you do an album like that? You put 6 microphones around the kit,
mm-hmm.
the drum kit, and when I'm finished with that song, and we know I performed well, they mix it as good as they can. Then they dump those 6 to a stereo track.
You got it.
And then you free up four microphones. Trevor lays down 2 tracks, you bounce that one.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Slowly We Rot was done. A lot of people don't realize that. That's how long ago. And
right.
then of course, then moving on, when technology started happening with Cause of Death, it was now 1990, triggering, not triggers as in kicking the kick drum and a trigger happens, but
mm-hmm.
sound replacing bass drums was a new thing in 90. And so Cause of Death album, there's this technology that, and for me, I'm an old school drummer. I hated the idea of it, and I still hate that album for that reason. I still don't. It's not my favorite Obituary album because it was not my decision. I mean, it was smart, I guess.
Yeah.
But I know as a drummer, I'm pretty solid with my performances.
Mm-hmm.
Not a technical drummer, but I try to play shit solid.
Right.
So to replace kick and snare drum, I'm like, why? It's like kind of a waste. And the technology back then to watch it have to count bass drums, like if you
right.
take the song Dying off of Cause of Death,
mm-hmm.
it was something hilarious, and it's nothing like what Dave from Psychroptic does in
yeah.
one song. But back then, again, 30 years ago, we were like, dude, it's 4,916 kick drums on that part right there, because the computer, that early on you had to watch everyone sound replaced the right way. It was tedious. It was days of work.
Oh God,
I hated that whole process. Same with, and nowadays, it's triggering and sound replacement and correction, quantize what
sure.
everyone does. What I do not do.
Yeah.
I love to keep my stuff just on the fly kind of feel, but yeah, that was just new technology. So by the time we went back to the end complete, I was like, no way, man. Don't do that to me ever again. I want to play my drums. I'm proud of my snare drum sound.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to do that to that snare drum.
Good for you.
So if you listen to back to it, Cause of Death is the only one where the snare drum's ridiculously loud and fake sounding,
Right. That's interesting. And it's funny to think that technology was there. And while it was more tedious, obviously it's become easier to do now, which is why you have so many quote unquote sort of perfect
absolutely
metal records, which, as you mentioned, all the quantizing, all of the sound replacement, to the extent that I've talked to a lot of drummers about it. And I especially like talking to guys that were around kind of prior to this in that they appreciate the way a natural kit sounds and both a natural performance, and can still inject that into a modern heavy recording, because at times it becomes so sound replaced and quantized that it inevitably sucks the life out of it, It
does. Yep.
Yeah. So I appreciate your appreciation for a natural performance.
I'm the John Bonham school of thought and Vinny Appice. Like, I love the sound of my drum kit in our studio. It's a very small studio. It's only 500 square feet. I think like 22 foot by 22 foot square
mm-hmm.
is the room. It's not a very big room. but the sound of the drum kit's nice. And so it's not just a microphone on each tom super close to the head and then relying on your inputs and your gates and your reverb that you're going to put on it, but also, a couple ambient mics front of drum kit about maybe 4.5 feet away, 6.5 feet away to pick up that airy ambient sound. And for some music, it's horrible to do that, to put ambient room mics. Some people are like, no, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But for obituary music, some of these mid-tempo songs, when we have an ambient mic that's, just whatever, just some kind of 421 that's out there picking up the air of the kick drum feel kind of in the room.
Right.
It really adds a lot. It adds breathe to it again. Like you said, it does not, instead of sucking the life out of the production, I almost flood it with it. And it might not be as tight and quantized sounding, but that's on purpose because I love John Bonham.
Yeah.
And that's the way his kit sounds,
Right. Yeah, you mentioned Vinny Appice. Of course, I love Carmine's playing as well early on with the Cactus stuff, and Ian Pace. Even I interviewed this guy Bobby Caldwell who played in Captain Beyond. That's another guy from the early '70s that was just playing some killer shit.
Awesome. Yeah, Vinny Appice was I'm very proud to say he was my main teacher. He taught me more listening to just all of the Dio stuff. Like the Holy Diver album, it's not the best album in the world. It's my favorite album in the world just because it's so real live drumming. It's just so good.
Absolutely.
It was just a good sounding drum kit. And
yes,
I love that album so much. And then the more you listen to it, which I've tens of thousands of times, because it's kind of like my Bible before showtime. That's kind of my ritual,
Yeah.
Is warming up, and I usually listen to the entire Holy Diver album and air drum to like Holy Diver, and then air drum to like Invisible.
Right.
And while warming up my whole body, that's kind of what I do, and it totally gets me ready for a show.
That's amazing.
Yeah, man, Holy Diver, love it.
I hear you, man. As you mentioned, to talk about a big, like natural sounding killer drums, and you definitely have to give Vinny some credit on his pocket and those big fills all across all those toms and everything. It's so awesome, man.
Yep, and that's basically the teaching that I got from him, is not just necessarily the sound or his technique while hitting the drum, but like you said, it's more of the metronome and the behind the cowbell feel so in the pocket, laid back. It's amazing that you can, stay solid when you're that in the pocket. It's
right.
It's a very amazing thing to start practicing and learn and get good at when you're playing even when you're playing to a click is try to stay behind the cowbell barely, like really, instead of being jumpy and ahead of the band, when drummers can learn to lay back and be behind that cowbell by a millisecond. It's so cool that way,
Right. Yeah, my general rule because I always track, obviously, to click tracks, but in doing so, I track to it. Only I have it, and then I'm the one that lays that down, and I then, in monitoring that performance back, and preferably with the rest of the band that is recorded at that point, I don't really monitor the click track and whether or not I deviated from it. If I deviated from it and it's obvious, then I'm going to hear it. I don't need the click track as a reference for me fucking up,
Sure. No, it's good theory for sure. And that makes sense. And I think a lot of people get that for sure,
Absolutely, man. I've been revisiting some of your early recordings and whatnot. I've also been kind of in a funny phase since this whole onslaught of COVID. I kind of went through a year of 80 records from '87, and 3 of which the Armored Saint record, Raising Fear, as well as Yngwie Malmsteen's trilogy.
Right on.
And I don't know if you know the record Wild Dogs, Reign of Terror, with Dean Castronovo playing on that.
No.
Man, I interviewed Bobby Jarzenbeck, and he told me about it. And I checked it out. I was like, God, man, this dude is ripping. I think
what is it? I got to check it out.
Wild Dogs, Reign of Terror is the record.
Cool, man.
It also came out in '87. Many of these kind of records that I've been finding and kind of obsessing over seem to have come out in that year. But that's an interesting one, and his playing is killer on it, man.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out for sure.
Nice, man. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was reading one of the bands that Obituary toured with is this band Forced Entry, because I believe their record 91, As Above, So Below, is a record that a lot of people don't know about, I feel like. And my buddy turned me on to it, and I was like, first of all, this guitarist is badass. The whole band is shredding.
Yeah.
Did Obituary tour with them?
Fuck yeah, we did a 6-week American tour with them dudes, them and Sacred Reich.
Wow.
It was our first American tour we ever did. We did it in a van, 6 weeks, like something crazy, like 36 shows or something.
Wow.
It was long. And that was, I might've been 91. Their first album was just coming out, I think. Do we know when that thing was released?
Yeah, I think it was either 89 or 90.
Yeah. So it was a 90 tour. And in fact, I'm almost positive the Sacred Reich tour was in 1990.
Wow.
First show was San Francisco. And as Florida boys, we drove for 4 days pulling a trailer in a van to get to San Fran.
Wow.
No shows in between. We didn't know any better. Again, the 20-year-old kids just, we're out of here, Mom. Going to take on the world first. Thanks for making the first show.
Right.
Thanks, Sacred Reich, for making the first show San Francisco.
Right. Oh, my God, that's amazing. Holy moly. What do you recall about seeing that Forced Entry live, man? Because
They were killer.
Right?
They were killer live, and I love that record. And they were cool dudes. Yeah, for sure, man.
Right on. And just a trio, right?
Yes, they were.
Wow. Shredding. Sacred Reich as well at that time, definitely shredding themselves. That would have been a cool build to see with all three of y'all.
They were shredding, man. That's when Greg was a treat to watch for sure, man.
Oh yeah, man. If you and think back to that first run that y'all did out there, was there any particular show that was especially bizarre or just ridiculous or even just fucked up for any reason?
Oh God, I don't remember. I don't remember December or April 1990
right
very well anymore. It was a cool tour. I remember, again, I told everyone knows American tours. Oh my God, that you play a show, and as an opening band, we were second on the bill. We were direct support, and so you play a show, you get your stuff packed up, and then Sacred's on stage. Are you really going to get in the van and take off and start driving that 11-hour ride to the next show, which you should be doing responsibly? Of course not.
Right.
We all just stay till it's almost over, and then everyone jumps in the van. One person's got the first night shift, and let my brother get about 4 hours of sleep under him.
Right.
And then he would take over and drive. And so my point is, everyone knows if you've toured America, every show is at least 8 hours away.
Right.
8 or 10 hour ride every night. So you do that in a van. That's why big ups to all those bands that grind and do it, because we did it for sure. And it's not just punishing. It's dangerous, but it's necessary. You know what I mean? It's the way you do America. You got long drives, and someone's got to be careful and stay awake and make it to the next show.
Totally. When you think back on that tour, at least, was it pretty well supported with crowds coming out?
It was, man. Metal was exploding. Obituary had an amazing crowd response every night, and we were new on that. That's us going to the West Coast for the first time. We never toured America before.
Yeah. And
it was killer, man. It was really, really, really fun for us. And Sacred Reich dudes ended up being super good friends, brothers of ours. Lifelong friends now.
Absolutely, man. Super cool. It's amazing to see everybody sticking it through all these years, man. That's a hell of a commitment.
Yeah, well, it's the most fun you can have when you call it a job.
Right.
And when you can't call it a job, it's still the most fun you ever have. Anyone joins a band and knows when you make a rhythm together and it makes you grin, your hair stands up on your arms.
Right.
I mean, everyone knows it's fun. That's why music's fun to even just listen to your favorite bands.
When you think back on your first kit that you got, I'm imagining it being just set up in the house and driving your parents crazy. Were your bands rehearsing there as well and driving your parents crazy?
Yeah. Yep. If you want to date me, yes, it was 1982.
Okay.
And I found a bass drum and a tom in one of my friend's garbage. Like, his mom threw out his blue sparkle Ludwig make fake thing. So I only had one kick drum and one tom. And so I went, and when I made it home, my friend brought over some bongos, and and my first kit was, yes, I pulled my brother's weight bench up to where you usually set the bench when you're done bench pressing, where you put the weights. Instead, I hung the bongos from them, put the kick drum up underneath it, sat on a bucket, and just started. I had a pair of drumsticks, and I had fun for like about 30 seconds. And both the bongo heads were broken.
Oh my God. Hilarious.
Because you're not supposed to hit a tiny little fake bongo thing with drumsticks.
Totally.
I learned. I was only 12, man. Give me a break.
Right. I mean, something to be said for your ingenuity at 12 to hang them from that and actually make the thing happen.
absolutely. That was the child's first kit, you know what I mean? And then it got for real, you know. Then one of my really good friends, Greg Gall, who was the original drummer for 6 Feet Under, who also was again a big influence on me here, because he had a band called Cyanide in 1985, 86, and it taught us about metal. Anyway, Greg sold me his drum kit because he was wanting another one. And that was my first real drum set that actually had stands and set up. And that was like literally, I think I probably got that thing in 1985, I bet.
Wow.
Maybe even 84, you know. So yeah, that was, until then, I had 2 friends that had beautiful drum sets because their family was pretty well off, apparently financially. And they both had, you know, one of them had literally the Lars, when Lars first showed the Yamaha kit with all 4 Tama toms up top. His parents bought him that whole thing in candy apple red with like 20 cymbals. I'm like, oh my God.
Whoa.
So I was on my bike over there, you know, riding my bike, bothering him every day. Hey man, is Ben home? No. Is his drum set home? You know, and then another friend of mine just right down the road had a drum kit. So until I got my own kit, you know, I had to go and play someone else's drums, you know.
Absolutely.
But my first kit was just an old beat up Ludwig kit, totally no bottom heads, or not even rims, you know, like the 70s kind of thing. No bottom rims or drum heads.
Wow.
And just went for it, you know.
Yeah, man. Concert toms all around. Holy shit. Well, you mentioned obviously Vinny and John Bonham as influences. When you were just first starting out there, was there any particular drummer that you still feel as though there's some of that influenced in your playing to this day, aside from those 2 guys?
Vinny Appice.
It's still Vinny, yeah.
Vinny Appice is in my blood. I like, we're writing now. We're writing music right now. So Monday, Tuesday, I was here. Trevor already just laid down a little bit of scratch guitar for me to start practicing a couple of the songs, and I just feel I can't help it. Like, Vinny is in my DNA more than it's ever been, and I love that. And I'm not going to stray away from it because it makes the song better. You know
I hear
what I mean?
you. Yeah.
It's totally great, man. Yeah, I used to. I guess when I was younger, I didn't really think much about it, and I didn't think I was influenced or that it would influence me. But at 50 years old, I definitely accept the invitation of being influenced still by the ones you love,
right?
By their playing, you know. It's great.
Hell yeah, man. Well, with music streaming being the primary source of people's music consumption in this day and age, and then, of course, you add on a band's inability to go out on the road and sell physical copies and or merch and or, you know, have that sort of stream of income coming in, does Obituary have any plans of doing any sort of live concert or show, stream, video stream, etc. In the meantime?
Like anybody, that we want to tour, you know. That's the way you do it, you know. Being in a studio with microphones and having to record albums is tough enough, but to stream live and it be so under the microscope and boring for the fans, because let's face it, you know, it's not the same as a live concert. But what we also know as music lovers and music industry, it's time to make a move, because it's going on month number 7 that we have been home without work. Right. And it's clear that even in 2021, it's not going to happen for us when it comes to touring. And that is our primary job. You know what I mean? It has been for me, 2 decades. It's been my full-time job. Right. So yes, Obituary does not waste any moments, and we are super excited. We just announced Monday a 3-part live stream concert series where October 17th, we're going to stream live from ESI Studios. It's a soundstage. Okay. And we're going to perform the entire Slowly We Rot record. Nice. And then the next Saturday, we're going to stream the entire Cause of Death album. Okay. Very cool. And it's going to be as live as it gets. That'll be October 17th is Slowly, and October 24th is Cause of Death. Awesome. And then 2 weeks later, we're going to come back to our studio that I was telling you guys about. This is the home studio here that we've been here for 20 years. And it's just it's a man cave. It's got the pool table, and JT watches his Miami Dolphins out here, and we've recorded the last 5 albums for Obituary and the Tardy Brothers in this studio. So we're going to stream live from this studio as well, and kind of bring the home studio flip-flop. No lights, no smoke machines, and we're going to go for it. And we're going to play all the ones that people are going to be asking for, all the songs, the favorite ones that they like, and the classic ones that we don't necessarily got to play on the Cause of Death album or the Slowly Rot album. So I'm super excited about that.
Very cool, man. It's good to know that y'all are making moves and making the best of it. Well, you are talking about revisiting some of those songs from 30 years ago. Yeah. Are there faster songs that you played then that seem a little more challenging now, and or in revisiting what you played back then, do you sometimes scratch your head thinking, why did I play that way?
Oh, well, is that a trick question? Of course.
Yeah, right.
Both of those, yes and yes, because I'm sure if you've interviewed or read enough interviews of drummers, I know for me anyway, you listen back, especially to Slowly We Rot and Cause of Death, but mainly Slowly because we were so young, so nervous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're talking about that album was recorded in two parts. We had an 8-song album when we got signed, when a Roadrunner was interested in us. And so we recorded that first, was about 1988.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so nervous. So yes, to answer your question, man, I listen to those songs and my doodahs are so fast because I'm like an 18-year-old kid, super nervous in the studio.
Yeah.
So all my shit is way too fast. And you listen back to it and it's hilarious. It's so funny listening to it compared to what it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
But it is what it is. It's history recorded. As an 18-year-old, I recorded it, so it's cool.
Right.
But yes, that and the same thing you said, it were certain parts and stuff that is different. It throws you off nowadays. It is funny listening back to those records after 30 years.
Oh, it would have to be. I mean, I can't even imagine. I've listened back to just cassette tapes of my early bands from when I was 18, and I'm like, this is just fucking terrible.
It's hilarious. Yeah, but in homage to those albums, I'm going to try my best, and I'm pretty good at trying my best on my songs to play it very close to what it is on that record, on Slowly Rot performance on the 17th, and then same with Cause of Death.
Yeah.
There's things that make, it's like nails on the chalkboard to me because I was only 20 years old recording Cause of Death.
Right.
But I'm going to try to play it the way it is on the record because we're saying we're playing it in its entirety, and I want people to go, yeah, that's that part. I remember that cymbal right there, that kind of shit. So I'm going to do my best to emulate what I did at 20 years old.
Wow. That's crazy,
so,
man.
It's all good.
Throughout the years of playing, I know you mentioned that you haven't changed much in your form or like in ergonomic, with the ergonomic adjustments necessarily, but I'm just curious I'm approaching 30 years of playing at this point as well, but I've definitely gone through phases where I've had just aches and pains and maybe have had to re-examine sort of certain ergonomic aspects of my own playing to see if I could alleviate those aches and pains. Have you gone through any of those yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone does when it's just age. It's the same thing when when you sweep your living room, it's you start doing different techniques because the body tells you to, but that's life, it's getting older.
Right.
But yeah, I guess so, man. I'm lucky enough to where, again, Obituary, some mid-tempo, groovy, Vinny Appice style, it's not 1,000-mile-an-hour bass drums and blast beats that make your wrists catch on fire.
Right.
But yes, absolutely. It's still a challenging, it's still punishing for Obituary songs for me because I play at such a volume and intensities that yes, I've gone through a few, just weird things where flipping my ride stick over, even though I use rock wood tip, the first, but I've flipped butt end over on my ride and choked up a little bit, and it seems to work for me. I've been doing that. I did that like about 10, 12 years ago, and then I went back to normal. And for the last about 4 years, I went back to since the Inked in Blood album. So that's probably about five years ago.
Wow.
I went back to flipping the butt end over for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But silly drummers. It's hilarious watching drummers. The little tiny millimeter adjustment you got to do before the next song. And
yeah, right.
The adjustments.
Right on. I don't know if you drink or not, but I'm always curious as to whether or not if people have a limit, or you don't have any, even so much as a beer beforehand, but maybe have one afterwards, or maybe during.
Yeah. Well, it's a damn good question because no one ever thinks about it, but some people don't even know what the answer would be on themselves. But yes, I've always been a sports watching, Budweiser drinking, Florida boy. So I love it. But when I was younger, for sure, man, and weed, I mean, I guess every day of our life, me and Trevor, when we were writing music when we were young, it was just do a hit of weed and write, whether it was in the studio or in front of 1,000 people on stage.
Right.
But for me, alcohol, yes, drumming wise, I never took a sip before showtime ever.
Wow.
For 25 years of my career. Only because I just knew that, hey, I don't really necessarily need it. I maybe 3 songs into it, I'll take a couple sips to just whistle my whistle, and because I love beer.
Right.
But nowadays, it's funny, but for now, the last, say 4 years, 5 to 6 years, I'm totally cool with slamming one delicious cold Budweiser right about 12 minutes before showtime. Just get it in me, and whatever, it just relaxes a little bit.
Yeah.
And not to mention how delicious a cold beer coming out of ice is to put you in the mood to go play an hour, 17 song set,
Right.
But to answer your question though, yes, limit. I would never drink more than 2 beers, and no matter how long of a show it was.
Right.
I usually put one in me when I'm walking the stage, and then play a few songs, and then once there's a guitar players are tuning up and stuff, I'll crack that one and just kind of sip at the next 10 songs,
Yeah. I hear you. I do. I have found that even if it's a beer, maybe 2 max before, I generally feel pretty good, pretty loose, and I'm ready to rock. That seems to be the good limit for me as well.
It's funny, drugs and rock and roll, man, they go hand in hand. Who would have thought?
Oh, that is hilarious, man. Well, we were talking a little bit about sort of some of the modern bands that you might dig, and you mentioned Psychroptic. You feel free to tell me a little bit about how you know those guys and your impression of them, and or if there's any other sort of modern heavy bands that you really dig.
Yeah, they were introduced into my brain because they showed up as one of the bands of 4 bands on the bill in Europe, an Obituary tour. And there were 2 Australian bands that came on the plane over to do the tour with us. But Psychroptic was the one I was just like, what in the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And it was the most sick shit I've ever heard in my life. And ever since then, I think they're the most impressive metal band there is on the planet when it comes to, if a Martian came down and says, play me something sick, it would be Dave's drumming and Joe's guitar playing. Joe's riffs, it's some of the most impressive shredding and groove that I've ever witnessed in extreme metal.
Right.
And I don't listen to a lot, so a lot of people can probably yell at this monitor right now at me because I'll be the first to say I do not dive into thousands of bands. I'm an old school, still listening to Sabbath and Leonard Skinner and Molly Hatchet. That's
right.
That's me.
Southern rock.
But when I put on Psychroptic albums, my body can't control itself. Literally, and my girl's the same way. I turned her on to it, and we pretty much agreed that it's the most impressive display of metal a band can be together, and a 2-brother band can ever play.
Yeah. And
I love it. It's ridiculous. It's like you can't listen to it all the time for me because it's mental,
Right. And then of course Psychroptic, as I was saying earlier, joining the ranks of brother bands along with Pantera, Gojira, and obviously Obituary, your band. That's wild. There's something to be said for brotherly chemistry and or sisters, sisters, like I said, in heart. And then, of course, you get
one of the best bands in the world.
I know, definitely. Man. Yeah, that's actually a record that I've been obsessing over. I believe it's their 3rd one, and it reminds me of Led Zeppelin's 3. And it's Little Queen is the name of it. And that's a record I've been playing a lot. It's really fucking good, man. Wowzers.
Yeah, man.
Were there any other modern heavy bands outside of Psychroptic that you've been digging?
Dust Bolt, young German band that for the last 4 or 5 years they put out like I think they have 4 albums now.
Okay.
I love it. I was turned on to Dust Bolt again. I walked into a venue in Holland. In Germany.
Mm-hmm.
The young Germans. I walked into the backstage in Germany for my show. Had no idea who the opening band was because we had a local.
Yep.
So I was walking across the venue while a band was on stage, and I stopped in my tracks and was like, "Damn, what is this? It sounds like early '90s West Coast thrash metal at its finest." And
wow.
I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" and not to mention, they were going for it. They looked like a young Obituary. If you see footage of Trevor and my brother, like there's footage of them on stage in like '89, thrashing so hard, it looks like their neck's gonna pop.
Right.
And that's what those dudes were doing. I'm like, this band is crazy as hell. And then sure enough, I got their album called Awake the Riot.
Okay.
And ever since then, Dust Bolt, I've listened to more Dust Bolt than any other band the last probably, besides that Carcass record, besides the Surgical Steel.
Gotcha.
That one was in my player for, I think, a year. It didn't leave.
Wow.
But yeah, Dust Bolt, man. If anyone is looking for some Germans that truly know how to throw down thrash metal, their first 3 records are just phenomenal.
Okay, good to know. All right, man. I'll definitely check them out. But yeah, man, good talking to you, Donald. Appreciate the insights, and appreciate again you staying with it. There's something to be said for persistence and keeping the wheels on the truck a rolling. You know.
Right on, man. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed a little bit of insight of Obituary, and as you can see, I'm not afraid to talk about it, and super excited about just everyone listening to you and I and bringing up the past and giving some insight to what people had no idea, probably how we recorded those first 2 albums.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad we got to talk about that. And I tell you what, man,
Cool, man.
all this beer talk's got me fucking thirsty. I'm about to go crack one.
Right on. I'll join you, and I'll talk to you next time, man.
All right, buddy. Good talking to you, man.
Yep. See you guys later.
Later.
Peace.
All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging. Thanks to Donald for rapping. Definitely good to hear some of those old stories about the Florida scene that I was never really able to witness in person, but one that I've nevertheless been ultimately very fascinated by. So, Donald, thanks for hanging. Thanks for rapping. Hope y'all check out their 3-installment stream that's coming up. We'll catch y'all on the next one. Crash, bang, boom.